What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. 2 languages? Bilingual. 1 language? An American. Of course, there are Americans out there, like me, who speak more than 1 language, but we're in the minority. Only 1 in 4 Americans even owns a passport. They don't travel abroad, so why bother with another language? Americans get their ideas about foreign countries from TV and movies. This explains why some Americans are convinced that the U.S. is the best place, the only place to live in the world. But is the U.S. truly number 1? We are number 1 in certain areas. We've got more guns than anybody. The United States has 90 guns for every 100 citizens. Coincidentally, and I say this with a lot of sarcasm, we also have more firearm murders per capita than any other rich nation, 5 times more than Switzerland. Handgun murders are 200 times higher than Japan. We also have more people in prison, 2.1 million to be exact. That's 5 times the population of Luxembourg. This statistic is meaningless to most Americans since they have no idea that Luxembourg even exists, or that its per capita GDP is almost twice that of the U.S. I'll put that in layman's terms. They're about twice as rich as we are. You know, it's not just the easy availability of guns that makes this the deadliest rich country. It's our attitudes as well. Nearly 1 out of 4 Americans believes that using violence to get what he wants is acceptable, and 43% of Americans think torture is sometimes justified. We also like to export violence, and I'm not just talking about movies, TV, gangster rap, and video games. The U.S. is the number 1 arms seller in the world. We may not be able to export democracy, but we sure can deliver death. Speaking of killing, we've got the world's strongest military. It damn well better be, since we spend more than the next 14 nations combined. That's nearly $500 billion per year. And what do we get for it? The Taliban is harvesting a record opium crop in Afghanistan. We can't catch Osama bin Laden. And the Iraq War has turned into a giant quagmire. Well, at least if you're one of the thousands of amputee veterans coming home from Iraq, you can go to the Walter Reed Army Hospital and have a rat as a roommate. Is God blessing America or what? That's too depressing to think about. So let's focus on the economy. We've got the world's largest. We're number 1 in total GDP, baby. We're also the most productive on the planet. In 2006, each U.S. worker produced almost $64,000 of wealth. Too bad he had to work more than anyone else to do it. We have longer hours and less vacation time than anyone in the world, even the Japanese. Our income distribution is beginning to resemble that of a third world country. The top 10% of Americans earn 30% of the income. This puts us in the middle of Laos and China for income inequality. Even Ghana and Bangladesh manage to do better than that. The worst news of all is that we don't save what we earn. Americans have a personal savings rate of less than 0. It hasn't been this low since the Great Depression. How did this happen? Massive borrowing, especially home mortgages. Everybody was rich on paper, but all that equity has vanished in the housing crash. And so will all the credit-fueled consumer spending that's been fueling the economy. Until now. Don't expect the government to bail us out either. They borrow huge amounts of money from Japan and China just to keep us afloat. Even if foreigners keep buying up our national debt, it's doubtful Social Security and Medicare, as we know them, will even exist by the middle of the next century. Our entire country is going bankrupt. But hey, isn't health more important than money? Don't we have the best health care money can buy? Yes and no. Americans do spend more money on health care than anyone else, but we're not the healthiest. Our life expectancy is 44th, below Bosnia's. Infant mortality is 41st, behind Cuba's. Women are 70% more likely to die in childbirth here than in Europe. The World Health Organization ranks us 37th for overall health performance. In the fairness of health care, we're 54th. This means the rich get great health care and the poor don't, just like in Mexico. If you're one of the 42 million Americans without health insurance, you can follow President Bush's advice and go to the emergency room. He's such a softie. The good news is we're still ahead of Mexico in 2 categories, obesity and plastic surgery. We're the fattest, most surgically altered people on the planet. You are probably unaware of this because education, as we all know, is a disaster in the U.S. In literacy, we're 49th in the world. In mathematical literacy, we're 28th. For more on American ignorance, check out one of my other videos, America the Stupid. You'll be amazed at how many of our fellow citizens think the sun orbits the Earth. You'll also be amazed at the number of grammatical and spelling mistakes in the video's comments section. Most of them written by angry Americans who insist they're not dumb. I can't tell you how many times I've been called a moran, M-O-R-A-N, like the surname, by people who cannot spell moron. That's irony so thick you can cut it with a butter knife. Our national philosophy has already been summed up in a bumper sticker. He who dies with the most toys wins. We've got more stuff, and bigger stuff, than anybody. Bigger cars, bigger houses, bigger asses. What we don't have a lot of is quality. Our cars are crap. The famous Humvee is universally regarded as the biggest piece of shit on wheels by American car magazines. Harley-Davidsons are a mechanic's wet dream because they break down so often. American houses are made out of cardboard and aluminum foil. You can punch through interior walls with your bare fist. To get through the exterior walls, you might need something more advanced, like a brick. We're the only rich nation that allows human beings to live in mobile homes year-round. We call these settlements trailer parks. The UN calls them refugee camps. Okay, you might say, if we're so bad, why does everybody want to come here? Isn't migration the ultimate sign of civilizational superiority? The U.S. does get the lion's share of world migration. After all, we're the largest wealthy country. But if you add up the figures for the large European countries, you'll realize they're just as popular, if not more so. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand get much higher inflows of immigrants per capita than the U.S. We're the number one choice for penniless, poorly educated Latin Americans. But where do the educated, well-off immigrants go? Every year, more Germans migrate to tiny Switzerland, population 7.2 million, than to the entire U.S., which has 300 million people. What about our cousins, the English? They don't have a language barrier. Their top 4 destinations are Australia, Spain, Canada, and New Zealand. We're the 5th choice. Hey, look at it this way. Our nachos have never tasted better. So the U.S. isn't number 1 anymore. So what? It's still one of the top 10 or 20 countries, isn't it? My message to you is a simple one. We can do better. The real problem is complacency. The real enemies of the U.S. aren't annoying assholes like me, but the loudmouth America, love it or leave it types who refuse to examine their own country critically. By ignoring America's weaknesses, they further weaken the country they claim to love. They're like alcoholics in denial, drinking themselves to death on blind patriotism and viciously attacking anyone who doesn't want to get drunk with them. Consider this your intervention.